Hello and welcome to the Freelancer's Teabreak, the short and sweet podcast you can enjoy whilst you're making a cuppa. I'm your host, Emma Cossey, and this is the podcast for anyone who is already freelance or is thinking about going freelance. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Freelancer's Teabreak. And this week we've got a guest on. Katherine Pearse is joining me, and I met Katherine at a recent Berkshire Mummies event. So I've mentioned Berkshire Mummies a couple of times before. It's a networking event near me. They do lots of lovely ones, very warm and welcoming. And we had an International Women's Day event that I attended. And I got chatting to Katherine. And Katherine mentioned that part of her role was being fractional and being a fractional CFO. And having just recorded a podcast a few weeks ago about discovering the term fractional and not necessarily understanding it 100%, I was like, okay, I need to know everything Katherine has to say about this. And then I thought, well, why don't I bring Katherine on the podcast and she can tell us a little bit more from a lived experience of being it. And it really opened my eyes up to the terminology more. So I thought Katherine would come on, and also really interesting business. So first of all, Katherine, welcome. Did you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Hi, Emma. Thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast, and thank you very much for such a warm introduction. Yes, absolutely. Shout out to Berkshire Mummies and Shona, because it was an absolutely beautiful event. And I got to meet you, so just win-wins all round. A little bit about my business. I am the woman who loves business even when it doesn't make sense. A business runs through everything I do. I see my role as empowering small business owners to make aligned decisions. I understand that decisions can, quite frankly, be scary, and to me, that's what I help people do. I love that through the training that I've done, the experience that I have, I'm able to look at decisions that need to be made and see them from three different angles. As a fractional CFO, I'm looking at your numbers, your data, your analysis, supporting you to make decisions in a way that things make sense. Through the systemic coaching lens, we tap into the phenomenological field, the knowing field, and support people make decisions and see blocks that are probably underlying and more than just their balance sheet. And as a movement facilitator, it's working on grounding people and helping make grounded decisions so that they can get out of their heads and into their bodies.
I love that. In my head, I'm kind of imagining it like those three fairies in the Disney film. I can't remember if it's Cinderella. Where each one has their expertise and approaches it from a different way and work together to create the perfect spell that will help that business.
That is gorgeous. Thank you. I'm going to take that. Cinderella's fairy people, fairy god. Are they godmothers? Yeah, they can't be. But anyway.
we'll assume, we'll elevate them to that
yes.
status. So you mentioned there about part of your role as being a fractional CFO. So could you have you always called yourself a fractional CFO? Was that a newer thing? I'd love to know your journey.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'd actually really like to support defining the term fractional CFO, while specifically defining the term fractional, because I think it's a very popular word right now. I think a lot of people are using it. I think, and in defining it, sometimes it's easier to explain what it's not to start off with, and rather than what it is. For me, it's not an interim. I see an interim role being something that's quite project-based, quite short-term, and short-term can really, in the length of a business journey, be anything from a week to, some people have an interim role that lasts 2 years. But, it depends on the type of project and how they're supporting the business. It's not part-time, because part-time for me is still on an employed basis. So it can come with, obviously, employment costs. It can come with also employment risks. And when I say employment risks, I mean for the organization hiring someone part-time. It's not as easy to, a part-time individual still has the same employment security that a full-time individual does. I'm not saying that they get the same money, but they have the same protection as an employee of the business. I would also say that it's not necessarily a consultant or an advisor. Consultants tend to come in, they tend to be like slightly removed, not really getting their hands dirty. They tend to support businesses in making strategic decisions, which of course a fractional would as well, but it's more from a distance is how I see it. That is, to me, the consultant, the advisor. It's more like, this is what you should do, but not necessarily this is how you should do it. Whereas for me, a fractional is much more embedded. And specifically as a fractional CFO, so I'm not sure I need to explain that title as well, but a chief financial officer, for those who don't know, so someone who is, your strategic financial person within your business. We do have to worry about falling foul to, shadow directing in theory. We can never tell a business owner what to do. We support them in what they should do. But we still take a fairer amount of responsibility for the function on as a fractional. We really are not only this is what I think you should do, but this is, and then allowing the business to make the decision on what they should do, but this then also, and this is how it can be done. So that is, to me, what really makes the difference with a fractional. Sarah Daw, who is the CEO of the CFO Centre and the Liberty Group, and she's done a lot of work around promoting the word fractional, because in all of those businesses, it is about whether it's fractional marketing, whether it's fractional HR, whether it's fractional finance people, it's about promoting that sort of that fractional role and how they can really support businesses. She did a post on LinkedIn, which went fairly viral, in that she said that she feels that what makes fractionals different, and I'm going to use the word special, which is not the word that she used, but is that fractional CFOs tend to have in-house experience. Most fractionals will have come out of being full-time at some point of their career, and now they're working on this more part-time, but not as an employee, but working as someone outside of the business on a fractional basis. And I think for me, the bit that for me, it was great because part of there was a lot of validation in that, I think, because a lot of imposter syndrome can come in, because I think in a lot of the work that you do, it's about supporting your clients who are a specialist in their field and moving to freelancing or moving to that fractional space. And for me, there is that slight imposter. Do I have enough expertise to be able to do this? But to me, it was just a great validation that at the end of the day, it's all that experience that is going to support me in being a better fractional CFO, because I deeply understand what it means to own the function that I am now on a fractional basis responsible for. Sarah eloquently says that you can be a fractional anything, because fractional, you can be a web designer, you can be a consultant, because fractional it simply describes a way of working on a part-time, self-employed basis. And that validation of that experience of having that full-time accountability and responsibility is just I don't know, I found it incredibly validating. I do want to just tangent a bit now. I think for me, since I agreed to do your podcast, I've had two really interesting conversations with people around the term fractional. The one gentleman I met at a networking event, and he said, "Oh, it's just a consultant. It's just a consultant." And it was interesting because in a lot of ways, yes, what I do within organizations can be seen as consulting, but again, it was trying to explain to him that there is a deeper level of accountability and responsibility that I would have to handle a function that a traditional consultant wouldn't necessarily have within an organization. And for me, fractional is also someone who's whose aim is going to be to work with the organization on a much longer term basis than a part-time basis. And then the other really fascinating person that I spoke to, she'd actually been running some training that I attended, and she actually sells herself as a fractional CSO, so Chief Sales Officer or Sales Director. And she kept saying, but there have been people who've been working on this capacity for so long, and it's just also the same as consulting. And I thought, oh, how interesting, someone who's actually using the title but doesn't see the same thing that I see. And I think, again, in part of that for me, and speaking to her, was that, again, like, she also sold a lot of training. So I think a lot of her experience and what she does is coming in, training people, growing a sales team, and then kind of leaving. And for me, that is really the fundamental difference between that more consulting and the fractional, because a full-time CFO will come in, and yes, of course, they're going to have to fix the problems. And once the problems are fixed, they also have to create the cadence. They have to grow the team. They have to mature the team. They have to make sure that the team is constantly innovating and staying engaged and staying motivated. And in some ways, that stuff can actually be incredibly boring, especially for the consultants and advisors who are used to coming in, doing the sexy thing, riding in, saving the day. So to me, like, the fractional is, yes, we are that. We come in, we sort out, we get shit done, and it's that creating that cadence, creating that ongoing, which in some ways can be like completely not sexy. So yeah, that is for me what a fractional is. And how I really see it, and how I see that it can support smaller businesses without having the cost of a full-time CFO in place.
Yeah, so it seems almost like, so you spoke to that person who said, it's just consultant, but actually it seems like an evolution of the consultant role, in that it's not just, I'm going to go in and tell you what to do. It's, I'm going to look at your whole business, review the best options, but then do it with you, like help you go through that process. I'm not just going to tell you what to do and run. I mean, that's not what consultants do, but it is much more about the implementation, which I think is what I think a lot of people are missing, in the same way that I know sometimes the biggest challenge for some of my clients is the accountability to actually get it done. So you're providing that by creating that structure and that plan. So yeah, it seems like an evolution more than the same thing.
Evolution, I love that. Who doesn't want to be evolved? I think in terms of the accountability, I think that for me, it's like, it's as you say, not just the accountability, it's like the plan on, this is how we do it. And it's all within, as specifically as a finance person, I'm clear everything needs to be within budgets and stuff. And, it's about making sure as a fractional that if I, is my time best placed doing some of the more junior work, or can we hire in someone to get the bulk of the work done, so that someone is still getting that strategic overview of the function? I'm not necessarily saying I'm the person you're going to hire me and I'm the person who's going to do everything, but we're going to make sure there's that balance of having the right resources in place, me being one of them, to support your business going forward.
So this is a bit of a tangent question.
Yeah.
Is it quite challenging? I love that. All of them. Is it quite challenging setting the boundaries with that, in terms of between being perceived as employed and self-employed? Because I think with a consultant, sometimes there's almost that detachment, so that they're treated like an employee.
Yes. You've basically hit the nail on the head, because it's something that I started off literally saying at the very beginning, is like, specifically from a finance director perspective, we do have to be very careful about falling foul of being a shadow director. Like, you are not an employee of the business. Employee of the business have certain rights, certain responsibilities. You are not. So it's about making sure that you are empowering the leadership to make good decisions, but also at the same time remembering that you are not necessarily an employee of the organization. It needs to be the leader's decision. And I think it really does depend on the client and how they want to work with you. For me, a fractional is a partner. That is how I see it. It's someone who is as excited about your business and how it can grow as you are, but who is prepared to have those conversations that an employee maybe can't, because their whole livelihood depends on having that job. Whereas my whole livelihood doesn't depend on having this job, and I want to support you in the best way possible. And it sometimes means having like really hard conversations, whether it's, should we be looking at downsizing? Should we be looking at growing? How are you treating this department, especially as someone who has always been in the SME space? Part of my expertise and my experience falls out of finance. It's fallen into HR. It's fallen into legal. So it's taking all of that and how we look at supporting someone's business move forward.
So have you always used Fractional for this role, or is it something you've started using?
Yeah, so for me, more recently, it was off the back of coming out of a full-time role. We'd done a big merger, and it was time for me to leave the organization. But what I did, which was unusual in previous roles that I'd done, is I did a handover of my role to the new CFO in place, and I stayed on for quite a while there. I did a very extended transition out of the organization, but what it gave me was the opportunity, while the new CFO kind of dealt with the more group aspects of the role, I started working with the smaller organizations within the wider group that we had, and partnering with the individual kind of business leaders. The group had gone through sort of a lot of acquisitions, and in some ways was still a little siloed. But I absolutely love that, and that is what really triggered me in this is actually the path I want to do. Is, I wasn't working with any one of those organizations full time. They all had me on a bit of a fractional basis, but be able to partner with those organizations and work directly with the business owners, helping them feel seen, guiding decisions, mentoring, like seeing how we could have those individual organizations grow, while at the same time being very connected with the group CFO. It was actually what sort of kicked this all off for me and made me realize my passion for it.
Yeah. And I think one of the questions I was going to ask next, but you kind of touched on there anyways. Have you noticed any difference in perception since using the term? Because you mentioned there, you sort of had those two really interesting conversations.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie. I found this, because when you sent me some of these questions, I found this the most interesting question, because to be fair, within my organization, I struggle with perception all around. I use terms that very few people use and understand. I walk into rooms, especially if I'm walking into a room with a lot of micro business owners, as I said at the start, I have to explain what a CFO is to them to start off with, let alone what a fractional CFO is. And then there's my systemic coaching, and people's like, what is that? They just hear coaching and kind of put that in a box. But what I do is different. So I think traditional coaching as well. So I think part of my journey and as a business is making sure that I'm selling solutions and not attaching too much to labels, because at the end of the day, they are just labels, and really it's about the value that you're adding to the business, which I think is most important. I mean, if you realistically wanted to call me a part-time FD, would I be upset? Probably not. At the end of the day, I'm clear that I'm not an employee. I'm not engaged in that fashion with your organization. So it's trying not to attach too much to the labels. But I have found that it's such a growing field, and it's growing in more than just finance. It really is across the board. I see it a lot in the CTO space as well. People who have chief technology officers, people who are supporting, again, it would tend to be, a fractional, I suppose, that the one thing in terms of perception, it would tend to mean you are dealing with organizations of a certain size. It's unlikely that you're going to be dealing with sort of a billion-dollar organization and then still holding a fractional title. It's possible. You might be what they call a CFO's CFO, so you're coming in and supporting another CFO. But so yes, I suppose there is a difference, and it's also just a very emerging word. So I'm kind of also keen to see where it goes, to be transparent.
I find it fascinating because I feel like I logged onto LinkedIn in January and suddenly everybody had changed their it wasn't everybody, but it was like, oh, fractional, okay, lots. And it was definitely more of the chief exec roles. And look, funny enough, when I talked about it in the newsletter, it's actually quite a lot of CMOs, so marketing officers.
Marketing officers, absolutely.
So they were the ones that sort of came back to me about it. But yeah, I find it very fascinating, especially as the term freelance is, the perception of that as a term is changing quite a lot. I feel like a lot of people are moving towards fractional. So I'm watching it with fascination. And I think I was a little bit cynical at first, but actually everything you said there makes so much sense. And I love that kind of, the idea of it is an evolution of a consultant role. I think, and actually very powerful for a lot of people who are feeling like things have changed in the business world. Something like this, a small tweak could make a big difference. So you touched a little bit there on.
Sorry, if I can just jump back on that and what you said, and I think for me it's really important for those who are making that transition from full-time employment and bringing that experience and that expertise into a more part-time role for whatever reason. If it's that their interests have shifted, or they just want, there are so many countries in Europe where actually working full-time is just not something you do after you turn 35. Literally, I had someone in the Netherlands once say to me, once you're 35 here, we don't work full-time anymore. It's just, do you know what I mean? It's just, there is a real want, I think, in society to have more balance. And I think using this word fractional gives you that it doesn't take away from the knowledge and experience that you've gained after all the years within whatever field it is that you've been working for. So, yeah.
Thank you. So you touched earlier on the three different areas, the three fairies, of how you approach business. Yeah. So I love that I've made some notes here so I don't get it all confused in my head, but you've kind of combined the very practical elements with understanding sort of humans and how they work. Yes. So I guess how do you find offering services for both first?
Well, to me, like I say, offering services, like I work in three capacities, but for me, even if you had picked one that you're working with, kind of the other three come along for the ride anyway, because it is who I am now. Yes, I am a qualified accountant. I have been working in senior finance roles for far many years than I care to admit now. I have always consciously worked with SMEs because I love the flexibility. And after, a very big, that role that I was talking about, very big merger that we did, I realized for me that there was a lot more that I wanted to offer the world, and that, the systemic coaching specifically was something I fell into. And the applications from a business perspective for me were just profound, even when I was initially working with it on sort of the more family constellation basis and more individual basis, because it is so important to see that when businesses are aligned and thriving, the employees within them are aligned and thriving. And when we have toxic management at the top, and we have, founders who are bringing in a whole bunch of trauma, this often filters down within the organization. And for me, it's about, I think with you working as a freelancer and now with me in terms of, being a business owner, I spend a lot of time with other business owners. However, we need to be clear that 95% of the population are still employed individuals. And when employment is not functioning optimally, these people are taking all of this energy home with them, and it's filtering down with, to partners, to children. And I don't know, to me, when you just, whether it's in a misalignment within the finances in terms of like laying people off every 6 months because, you haven't looked at your cash flow properly, or if it's an undercurrent of, a department that's been unseen for too long. And it's bringing up situations like, once we align all these things, you have happier workforce, you have a happier people, you have a happier community, you have a happier collective. It's actually interesting that you raised this question because someone dropped into my LinkedIn the other day, and she said to me, I find it really interesting that you have combined fractional CFO work and intuition. And I am clear that it does make me somewhat of an enigma. It does make me quite hard to sell, specifically for organizations when they're expecting to speak to someone finance, they're expecting to someone to speak to all about the structure, all about the numbers, and kind of block everything else out. And I know that it does make me, a little bit difficult to market, I think, in some ways. I went to a marketing event, and it's like that, I suppose I've brought it up again, that imposter syndrome that can come up is you need to be less in the space, or I need to focus on one area. But actually, for me, it's really important to have all of this considered, because I believe now that there is call it a rise in consciousness, just a rise of humanity. As much as we've got AI and all these things telling us we need to be less human in some ways, I think it's a real call to be more human. And for me, what it shows is that we can't be spending 20 minutes a day meditating and thinking we're going to be aligned and evolved human beings. These type of decisions and this type of looking at things in a much wider perspective needs to be embedded in everything that we do. And when most of the population is spending time in a workforce, if that workforce is not thriving, how can we expect the collective to thrive? That was a very roundabout way of answering that question. So
but it makes complete sense. But I feel like we're seeing a trend, and I don't know if as fractionals and freelancers we see this more because we're on the outside. I see so much of a trend ever since, particularly lockdown, when people came back into the office or anything like that. A lot of companies are just burning through their employees. They're just treating them like any other resource, and we're not humans. And if you treat humans well in the business and invest in them and treat them with respect, and also the AI thing, I think that adds to the problem, because then they're like, right, we can be even more productive, rather than, oh great, this can take some of the stress off our client, our
employees.
It's now more, right, you can do more and more and more and more, and everybody is burning out. And then, but it's almost like they're like, okay, that's fine, we'll just replace them. But actually then that costs the company so much more when they're constantly to retrain and deal with like higher sick leave and things like that. So actually looking after your employees and caring about the humans in your business is a financially great decision.
100%. And as I said, as someone who has in an SME often needed to take on that sort of HR, taking care of the human as well as the finance side of it, I used to struggle with that a lot. I used to have two inboxes so that I could have the right hat on. I would have my finance hat, and then I would have my HR inbox, where it's like I knew that needed to be the kind version of me. And how awful that I had to split it like that. And I know that it was my choice in some ways, but this is, to me, what is so important, is that alignment, that we need to be looking at organizations as a whole, and looking at from different aspects of the organization. And yes, there can be a financial decision that can make more money, but is it actually in the long term going to support the business grow? Because as you say, are we going to have higher turnover? Are we going to have higher sick leave? All of these things, in fact, cost the business much more in long term. So it's really taking that step, and sometimes it's not even just in those numbers. It's the people who've not been validated, because again, salary is a big part of rewarding employees, but it's also making sure that they feel seen. Nobody wants to show up at a job and not feel seen. And that is a lot to do with systemic work. It's about seeing what's not being seen. So yes, for me, it does make me a bit of an enigma. I'm not going to lie. But I think that there are organizations out there who are moving to a more conscious way of operating business. And I've seen them, and I see them. So, and I just think it's going to be a big shift for the planet in general as we move forward.
Yeah, it feels like almost we've been in survive mode for too many years now, like more than, and we need to move into that thrive, because you touched on thrive a few times actually when you said that as well. I thought it was a really good word choice for that. Yeah, we need to change, and we need to change how we're doing things, and this sounds like the perfect way to do that.
Well, this is the way I'm doing, and to be fair, I think that for every fractional, in some ways, I think it's what they are doing. And I think that's why we're seeing, you mentioned popping in on LinkedIn and just suddenly everyone is a fractional, because I think people are seeing that want for more and that want for balance, which is interesting given literally the very conscious choice in business name of my business is that we're wanting that balance. That's why a lot of people are moving out of the full-time employment and moving into the more fractional space, because it allows them to be more of who they are. Just in the sense, your day job and your bread and butter might be, coaching freelance, but you also write books, you also host podcasts, which, your podcasts create community, your books create education, because there's just so much more to you than this one aspect of your business, if that makes sense. And that's why I think that to me is the other real push, is that people are wanting to be more rounded, and a fractional space gives them the opportunity to do that, and gives businesses the opportunity to have expertise and support for a fraction of the cost in some ways, because they don't.
Oh, sorry, go on.
No, I was going to say, because they don't need a full-time employee necessarily.
There's a term we use on the podcast sometimes called a multipotentialite, which is from a website called Puttylike, which is someone who has multiple areas that they are passionate about. And I think sometimes traditional employee roles don't allow for that, whereas a fractional allows you to combine those strengths and present something even stronger than an employee role could do.
That is, I suppose that is why I see the boom. I think that people are wanting to be more rounded, and that means that business is going to need to once again change to support that as well in some ways, and not to see it as only supporting, but to take the opportunity that's in that as well. That's my perception of it, because I think that it can be incredibly good for business as well.
Oh yeah, 100%. So what is one thing you would like people to take away from this episode?
And I think for me, it's literally what we've just been talking about now, which is showing up as your full self is absolutely vital. I know that I've been talking about kind of 3 different arms of my business, and I haven't really spoken about I haven't spoken much about the movement in this particular case, but all of them are part of who I am. And I think that this is what makes working with me different, but it also is what makes working with me in some ways magical. This is my, people talk about it in the spiritual spaces. This is my medicine in the world, is that being able to sit down with you and look at your numbers and give you support in decision making from a very data driven space, and look at your business through a systemic lens, and look at you as a person, as a business owner, and how are you doing, like where is this sitting in your body. And for me, it's what I said earlier to, the same magic that you bring to the world is, you do the freelance coaching, you do the books that are out into the world that anyone can access. And when I say anyone can access, I mean that it's a low cost way to access the magic that you bring. And then you still do, this hosting the podcasters, which is bringing community, bringing people together. Like, why should you only be one?
Yeah.
So really, in one sentence, as opposed to the 10-hour ramble I've just given you, one thing is just showing up as your full self and letting that be okay.
Yes, strong message. So where can people find you online, and how can people work with you?
So where can people find me online? I think the easiest way to find me online is that link tree, and then it's just Building Balance Services. That is the easiest way because it has the connections to all the things. On Instagram, I'm building.balance.services, and on LinkedIn, I am Katherine Hall as opposed to Katherine Pearse. And then in terms of ways to work with me, I have a variety of ways to work with me. If you are a micro business owner and in the anywhere near Bisley, then once a month I run an embodied movement session that is designed specifically to allow micro business owners to drop into their body. We take spiritual practices and see how they impact their business. I absolutely love it. It's a bit of my passion project. That's a very low cost way of working with me. The other thing that I've literally just launched today is, again, for the micro business, small business owner, is actually working through the unseen. So I'm hosting a workshop with a colleague from Belgium. The two of us will support businesses looking at your business self, your own self, your family systems, and where is your loyalty most? So if there are things that aren't working in your business, it might not be the business itself. I absolutely love systemic work and just find it's such a practical way to see what's going on, because you literally use spatial mapping to support what's going on and using the knowing field to guide what's happening in your business, and so that once you've seen that, you can make different choices going forward. So that's something that I'm super excited about. Then, if you wanted to work with me on as a fractional CFO, something that we will be launching in September. I'll be working with Abby Moore, who's also she's a brand photographer and a marketing specialist, and we'll be coming in, and this isn't the name, I'm clear, because Abby has told me Board Days is the wrong name for it, but we will be giving small businesses the opportunity to have that marketing strategist and finance strategist come in basically once a quarter to support your business and how it moves forward. So, we know that as small business owners, we don't necessarily know everything. We know everything about our business, but there are gaps. And so it's bringing in that marketing and that finance gap, which is so often missing in businesses, because, people are really great at the coaching, but it's like, oh, I don't really want to look at the finance, and I don't like the numbers, and I need to do my marketing. Oh, I don't. So it's having access to us, but we'll be launching that in September. So super excited about that. And then if your business is of a bigger size, and you are realizing that perhaps you need to take your finances a bit more seriously, get in contact, and we can see how that works.
Thank you. I'll put all those notes in the show notes.
Thank you.
I will also put Abby's Instagram in there, because Abby has a brilliant Instagram and she always has some really good tips.
Yeah, she does. Yeah.
I'll make sure I include that. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully other people are coming away from this going, oh, okay, I understand it a bit better now, or might experiment with using it. If you're listening on Spotify, you can leave a comment there, or come on over to the Facebook group or the Discord to leave any comments. And go give Katherine a follow, because her Instagram is brilliant.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for inviting me.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Katherine. I hope you have a wonderful freelance week.